Good afternoon, everyone. This is Joe Papano. Thanks for joining us today. This is the last webinar, more webinar for 2011, and we're happy to have everybody on. We've got a pretty big group of people for as close as we are to the holidays. And today, Val Hetrick's here from our customer engineering team, and she's going to talk about best practices for managing iPhones, iPads, and Androids via Exchange ActiveSync. Hi, Val.
Hi, Joe.
And we know that most of the folks we meet as prospects, this is typically where they are, right? They've got Exchange ActiveSync enabled, and they're managing their mobile devices as best they can through that infrastructure. And so what we're going to talk a little bit about today is what you can and can't do via Exchange ActiveSync, because it is a very good place to get started. But as you get into more advanced types of needs, you're probably going to find that you really need to consider looking at a full-fledged mobile device management platform. And what Val's going to talk about is kind of some of those signs that tell you that you might want to look for an MDM platform. During the webinar, as we usually do, we're going to be running some polls. Val's going to do a quick demo of MAS 360 at the end, and obviously we'll take Q&A throughout. So if you've got questions, feel free to fire away during the webinar, and we'll do our best to cover them all during the webinar. If not, we'll catch them kind of during the Q&A session at the end. We're also going to be sending out some links to the next webinar, which I think is going to be January 5th. And also links where you can kind of view the recorded webinars, and also links to the slides for today's webinar, where we'll have the recording posted tomorrow. So with that, I'll hand it over to you, Val.
Great. Thanks, Joe. Good afternoon, everybody. So as Joe mentioned today, what we're going to talk about are some things you can do with Exchange to help you manage your iPhones, iPads, and Androids. And we're also going to cover some things that you should be aware of if you're going to do this or are doing this. If you're just starting to think about how to manage these devices and allow them into your Exchange mail, or if you've already opened Pandora's box and need to get control of these devices, I think you will find a few helpful nuggets of information within this presentation. So we're going to get this conversation started and just set the stage and define some of the context for our discussion today. If you're like the vast majorities of companies that we're talking to these days, you do have users with company or personal provided iPhones, iPads, or Androids, and they're probably falling into one of three different categories. You either have Exchange locked down, and you're getting a lot of requests from users, so you're opening it up for those users, but what's happening is those users are sharing your ActiveSync details with their friends, or you're cautiously enabling ActiveSync at a mailbox policy perspective to make sure you have some control over these devices. Whatever your situation, based on your attendance here, you are looking for some new tools or techniques or tips that can help get some basic level of control over these devices. There may be a real sense of urgency as some of these smart devices continue to become more of a security issue within the environment. In continuing our conversations with our customers, we're seeing that the BlackBerry Enterprise servers have provided most corporations with comfort and confidence for their BlackBerry deployments. And what we're hearing is that corporations want to have that same type of benefit with the Exchange ActiveSync or Lotus Traveler environment, quite frankly.
So we're going to run our first poll right now, and John's going to send this over, and you should see it in a second. And the question's pretty simple. How do you currently manage your mobile devices? So, Val, keep rolling while we're waiting for those results. We'll post them as soon as the results are in.
Great, sure. All right, so before we start talking about turning knobs and making changes, I did just want to have a quick look at some of the kinds of things you can do in Exchange for managing these devices. You can't see what you can't manage is one of our taglines here at MAS 360. And Exchange does offer you a few useful visibility attributes, mostly about 10, that can help you identify different device types and be able to understand what type of device is connected. You can also create ActiveSync policies and assign them to ActiveSync-enabled mailboxes using the Exchange management interfaces. As you can see from some of the screenshots, the user experience is adequate, More importantly, you can take actions on ActiveSync connected devices, which include the ability to change your mailbox policy, or you could remove a device or block a device from 2010 or perform a remote wipe on that device. Keep in mind that the wipe you issue from your Exchange administrator is a full wipe and could cause the iPad, iPhone, or Android to revert back to its factory settings. This obviously isn't a pleasant user experience, especially if the user hasn't backed up their personal data. Not completely relevant to our conversation, but it is worth mentioning that you can also manage legacy devices like Symbian, Nokia, or Windows Mobile through Exchange if you have this requirement.
And we've put the results up, so kind of like we thought, a lot of companies just have ActiveSync open, and they know people are pairing their mobile device up with their mailbox, or maybe pairing a mobile device and a tablet up with their mailbox. And obviously the risk in that type of an environment is, for the IT folks, is without some really digging around through Exchange, it's difficult to know who's connected a mobile device or what type of device they've connected with. And it's very common when we meet with companies and we do a quick audit of what's there. When we actually find out how many devices are connected to mailboxes, the number's usually much more than what they originally thought. So about half of you are in that boat. About a third of you actually lock it down, meaning that you individually go in and enable the devices administratively, which is a lot of work. So it might scale fine for a smaller company, but obviously a big company probably couldn't do that too well. Only 1% of you are using auto quarantine, which is a feature built into Exchange 2010, which can help manage this type of situation. So maybe that's just because a lot of you are still on 2007, which doesn't have an auto quarantine feature. I think Val's going to talk about what we can do to help you there later.
Right.
And then kind of various kind of custom tools built on PowerShell. So it's about what we normally hear. It's either wide open and there's a lot of risk, or it's locked down and there's a lot of work.
So jumping into some of the steps to start enabling ActiveSync in your environment, it's actually quite easy. By default, it's actually on within your Exchange environment, and you do have the ability to disable it at your individual mailbox levels or throughout the organization. So this is an area where you may want to put some thought into how you want to enable the access and what the different ramifications of different approaches are. As I mentioned, ActiveSync access is on by default for Exchange 2007. And this is the easiest approach and will make you very popular with your users, but you won't really have any control over who's connecting or being able to stop them to connecting without looking through your Exchange environment with PowerShell scripts. So you may want to think a little bit more about that area before enabling it for 2007. If you do want to be a little more cautious, you can enable access at one mailbox at a time. More control does equal more work, unfortunately. And also, when you enable the ActiveSync feature for the mailbox, it allows any number of devices to connect to the server. In either case, we would recommend that you periodically monitor who has connected what devices to the server, and we'll get to some of the reasons behind that in just a moment. So now that we've turned it on and you've become popular with your users, there's a couple things you should keep in mind. To start with, there's not a clean way of getting an idea of all of your connected devices in real time. In fact, this is where you may want to look into brushing up on your PowerShell scripting skills. Other than writing a script, there is no good way of getting a comprehensive device list. As mentioned earlier, if you want to provide more granular control over your mailbox access, you do have to use individual mailbox configurations. I will mention, for some of you that have made the move to Exchange 2010, the ABQ list, or the Allow Block Quarantine list, has become a big help. You may want to look into this if you're using Exchange 2010. I mentioned earlier that the Exchange Remote Wipe is all or nothing. Keep in mind that when it comes to wipe your boss's old iPhone 3GS, now that they have a shiny new iPhone 4S, you might want to double check that all their data is off. If you issue a wipe from Exchange, everything is gone. In order to get a good handle on reporting and to do some of the tasks that are not easily accomplished in the Exchange UI, you may have to do some script development. Customers that we've talked to that have a handle on this definitely have what I call an Exchange geek in-house. Another big challenge when you're using ActiveSync is trying to figure out which devices are no longer active and removing those devices from the Exchange server. Policy assignment is cumbersome. If you want to have your C levels in a different policy than your default users, you have to figure out which devices they have and manually assign that policy to them, and then keep a lookout for any new devices that might come in. One critical organization aspect, if you have multiple administrators taking actions on devices, there's also not any type of audit history to see what those administrators may have done. On that topic, the only team members that can execute action and view devices are the IT members with access to your Exchange environment. What if you need to wipe a device and can't get a hold of your Exchange administration? We don't really consider that very scalable. On the business intelligence front, you only have the information that Exchange holds for a device, and there's no way to assign items like ownership or department to that device. Not only are there a few gaps to consider, there's some real traps. Things that are, if not considered, can lead to issues and a lot of effort down the road. The big one is even if you are controlling access at a mailbox level, once enabled, multiple devices can connect to that mailbox. Say you allow an executive access for his iPhone 4S thinking it's fairly secure, but then he goes and buys an Android tablet and connects without notifying anyone. Now you have an exposure you didn't bargain for.
And I think for the folks on the poll, the 35% who responded on the poll, that we enable ActiveSync manually, so we think we've got things under control. I think the point here is that, you actually may not, right? Because once you enable it for that mailbox, that user, could take their kid's jailbroken iPad and connect to that same mailbox without you getting any warning or being able to block it or quarantine it.
Absolutely. It's also very difficult to control what can be connected. Joe was mentioning some of the jailbroken iPhones or rooted Androids, or even the old iPhone 3S that don't have any type of robust encryption. It is the Wild West of devices out there, and you really have no real way of viewing and controlling what is connecting. Another item to be aware of in terms of the Androids is that they may lie. They claim that they could enforce ActiveSync policies, but they may not be. There are Android apps specifically targeted to fake out ActiveSync. ActiveSync policies were created to leverage capabilities of Windows mobile phones for 5 and 6. They include a comprehensive set of policies that can achieve a very secure mobile device posture for those devices. What we are seeing is Apple and Google have implemented a small subset of those ActiveSync policy capabilities. It's really only a best effort and basically the minimum required to even be considered for enterprise adoption. We do have a good article on our Master Center that links out to a site that will show you which ActiveSync policies are supported across the devices for Windows, for Exchange 2007 and for 2010, if you want to get a better look into that. There are also some critical gaps in the ActiveSync policies that include the ability to apply device and application level restrictions or the ability to configure the device over the air. Here's a list of some of the supported Exchange ActiveSync policies. As you can see, support varies greatly depending on the device and the version of the phone, and also the version of ActiveSync that you're using. For example, you are able to enforce a password on iPads, iPhones, and Androids, including strength and inactivity before device locks. With Exchange 2007 and 2010, you're able to have more complex password settings, including password expiration, password history on the iPhone and iPad, as well as Android 2.2 and 3.0. You can also now allow or disallow the use of the camera on the iPhones and on the iOS devices, as well as require encryption before allowing the device connect to Exchange. Those same policies do not apply on Android. So we've covered what the native ActiveSync server tools can offer to manage iPads, iPhone, and Androids, and we've talked about some of the gaps and some of the traps you should be aware of. For some, this may be fine. For others, you may have a desire to supplement these capabilities with additional functionality. So now we're going to talk a little bit about some things you should consider as you try to decide whether or not you want to stay on Exchange and use their mechanisms to manage the devices, or whether you should look to add an additional tool. It may be important to be able to block a device before it connects. This will require a device-level auto-quarantine capability. This does not exist in 2007. However, as mentioned, Microsoft did make it available in Exchange 2010. You may need better device data and asset information and more consistent and reliable device data to make better decisions on what is accessing your corporate network. Do you really want Android 1.6 devices connecting? Do you want Android-rooted devices connecting? Do you need to track devices based on department or an ownership profile? These are all device lifecycle activities that Exchange does not help you with. If you are embracing personal devices, it's an important capability may be the need to selectively wipe devices. It may also be useful to send a simple lock command or help reset a person's password if they forgot the passcode.
So we're going to run our second poll. We're going to just ask folks really quickly here, and then I'll let Val jump back in. So Val's kind of talked about a bunch of administrative features that you really don't get access to with the AS. So we're going to ask which are valuable to you of the ones that Val just mentioned.
So another useful action is to be able to locate the device if it's lost or stolen. Some other important aspects may be the ability to delegate management to various functions in your organization. Do you need to allow your help desk staff access to the Exchange server? Probably not. You may want the ability to allow a help desk person to send a lock or reset a passcode, but only a level 2 support person to be able to wipe the device. This is typical how companies work that the Exchange management tools do not facilitate. These requirements may not be an issue if you only have relatively few devices, but it will soon start to become a problem as you open up access. The more happy users you have, the more structured you will need to keep them happy. Consider how long you can get by with the Exchange management capabilities before you can find a solution that cannot be accommodated.
So we're displaying the poll results, and kind of not surprisingly, I think the biggest needs people kind of identified here were the real-time dashboard, because that's certainly something you don't get at all with Exchange. There really are no dashboards or any type of real-time status of things. Asset tracking, which is kind of sort of possible with Exchange, but can be cumbersome. And auto-quarantine, which obviously we think is kind of a key best practice if you're going to be allowing people to connect into Exchange from their mobile devices versus pushing their EAS profiles down.
So we know we've covered off quite a bit of detail in the past 20 minutes here, and hopefully you found it useful. As you start to consider all the new information about the Exchange, what the Exchange tools can do and cannot do, it may be useful to have a look at an MDM provider like MAS 360. Specifically the ActiveSync Manager components, as well as some of the advanced iOS and Android management features. MAS 360 does complement Exchange ActiveSync capabilities to help the administrator and others deal with their mobile floodgates. MAS 360 adds a mobile device context to your Exchange management, given the current context is mailbox management, including device-level auto-quarantine for 2010 and 2007, as well as Office 365. We've also done implementations against BPOS-D environments. There's also an action history and an audit trail of who did what. We're not trying to replace your ActiveSync environment, and you certainly don't need to stop using ActiveSync, and we don't change anything that you will do with ActiveSync. We do provide full support for iOS 4, 5, and above, and Android 2.2, 2.3, 3.0, you name it, and higher in terms of MDMs, APIs in the respective platforms. We offer a simple over-the-air enrollment process. The iPhone or iPad or Android device can be configured and secured over the air using our workflows. Key help desk operations such as lock, wipe, selective wipe, locate, message, and other actions can be performed. And we will take a look at this a little closer in the demo. So just from a graphical perspective of how MAS 360 will complement your Exchange management functions is shown here. It is a good way to solve the administrative challenges we discussed that exist within Exchange, and also opens the door for greater possibilities by offering comprehensive management for your devices within a single framework. Best of all, it's cloud-based, requires no upfront cost, and can be turned up within minutes.
So we're going to run our third poll now. So kind of Val has kind of articulated some of the features in an MDM platform that you get that you would not get with EAS. We're just going to simply ask you what you think are important. And I think kind of the message that we certainly wanted to deliver was we don't think that it's MDM or Exchange ActiveSync. We think it's Exchange ActiveSync plus MDM is part of a kind of a comprehensive solution. We say that for a couple of reasons. One, there are these legacy devices like Windows Mobile, Nokia Symbian that speak ActiveSync, right? It's kind of the lingua franca for mobile devices, and so almost every mobile device on the market can speak ActiveSync, and so there's a basic level of policy lockdown you can perform on them and actions you can take on them. But as as more mature devices with more mature capabilities hit the market, like iOS, like Android, where you can start doing things like locate them, push apps to them, you're going to need MDM platforms of some type in order to take advantage of those features. And certainly what we're seeing with our customer base is kind of the companies on the leading edge are moving beyond that kind of defensive posture of just saying, okay, how do I protect myself from the risk of these mobile devices, and really trying to figure out how to play offense with them. And I think the iPad really propelled a lot of that because it's much more than a messaging platform, and it's much more of an application platform. So before we jump into the demo here, I'll just kind of quickly go over the results of the last poll. Not surprising, over-the-air configuration, device configuration is kind of one of the key features of MDM. Certainly simplifies the life of IT people, and is really kind of critical if you're going to do a bring your own device type of a program or an employee choice type of program, because typically IT is not going to be able to get their hands on those devices. So that makes a lot of sense. Over-the-air email, another popular one, and obviously device level policy control, which is really what it's all about. So thanks for your feedback on that.
All right, well, we'll jump into the demo here, which will give you a good understanding of how the system works. And just to level set, we're looking at our MDM demo zone that we've built, which is pointed at our Exchange 2010 test servers, as well as our BlackBerry environment, and have some iOS and Android devices enrolled. So when you first integrate with your Exchange environment, the immediate value we can bring you is via our Cloud Extender, which will give you instantly a list of all devices that may be ActiveSynced in your environment. What we're finding, obviously, is customers have ActiveSync enabled in their environment, but when they go to MAS 360 and look and see there's way more devices synchronized than they think there are. So this tool gives you some easy ways to ensure that you know what devices are out there, how many users have more than one device, and how many devices might be old. So one of the first things I want to show you is our Cloud Extender view from this perspective. And what I'm going to hop right into is our Exchange ActiveSync summary. And within here, you can gather the versions of your Exchange server, keep an eye on when the modules last spoke to your Exchange server, identify quickly if auto-quarantine is enabled within your environment, and also look at your Exchange server summary statistics. So we are able to pull back information about the amount of mailboxes you have, how many devices are synced, how many devices have more than one device, and how many devices are old that you need to remove. Within the Cloud Extender, we have some information to allow you to configure the settings. Configure Cloud Extender settings allow you to enable or disable auto-quarantine. It is off by default when you install our product. And what this allows you to do is simply go in and check the Enable Auto Quarantine of Device settings and add anybody that you may want to be notified. What happens when you do this is MAS 360 will look into each one of your mailboxes on your Exchange server and compile a list of devices that are already allowed. those will be grandfathered into an allowed list. Any new device that comes in after that will become quarantined, and the person on the notification list will be sent an email with the detail about who the user was and what device it was trying to synchronize. And at that point, the administrator can go in and either approve that device, or they could explicitly block them, which would prevent the flow of any email. One setting I did want to call out on the screen for the 2010 folks out there, since 2010 does have the ABQ list, we can also issue an explicit block on everyone outside of an allow. I have not seen one customer do this yet, but that option is available.
Hey, Val, there's one question that came in while you're kind of navigating around the portal, which was just, can you push policies at a group level rather than an individual device level?
So you can push policies at a group level for the iOS and Android settings. Unfortunately, Exchange gets set at the mailbox level as opposed to any device level information. So we don't have the capability to change Exchange policies from a group perspective, but you can change the iOS and Android policies from a group perspective. And I'll cover that off in a little bit here as well. All right, so taking a look at some of the actions we have available for the Cloud Extender, you're able to refresh the data on demand. By default, our scripts run every 15 minutes to collect new, old, or changed information from your Exchange environment. This allows you to do that instantaneous if you have a reason to. We also allow you to do a cleanup of your old devices. So here you could select the last 7 days and see you have 12 devices that have old ActiveSync associations. 95% of the time, these are devices that have been replaced and the user hasn't went into a remove, or the administrator didn't know about, so they're still just actively associated to that mailbox.
And that was a question, actually, Val, that came in earlier in the webinar. So you just kind of, question was, should we be removing older devices or devices that users no longer use that are listed in the mobile device properties?
Yeah, and I would certainly, from a best practice perspective, suggest that. Normally, when we're talking through our implementations with our customers, the first 2 items that we suggest is to install our Cloud Extender against your environment so that you can gain instant visibility into what you have. Once you get a handle on, the numbers, you're able to enable auto quarantine to start blocking anybody new from coming in, and then we do suggest issuing a cleanup as well.
A couple other questions on support. One question is about support for Windows Phone 7.
Sure. So Windows Phone 7 has 2 levels of support within our organization. The first is through the ActiveSync side of the house, so we can pull across your Windows 7 devices and manage them at an ActiveSync policy. We've also built a Win 7 agent that you can deploy down to your Windows 7 devices and do some higher level management. We have phase 2 of that coming out soon as well, which will introduce some App Store functionality on the Win 7 devices too.
So our direction would certainly be that the same sophisticated features you've got with iOS and Android devices, you'll also have with Windows Phone 7. We'll deliver that through an agent that will run on the device.
That's correct.
One last question, then I'll let you speak again. So there's a couple questions in about Lotus Note support or
Sure.
Lotus Traveler.
Yeah, so we do support integration with IBM Domino Traveler 851 or 852. We're seeing most people are on 852 and 853 at this point due to some of the additional Android support that was added. But same deal, we would install our Cloud Extender to point to your Traveler environment, gather a list of those devices, and we're able to pull the information across. The remove does apply to Traveler. Today, IBM doesn't have any type of auto-quarantine functionality that we're leveraging. We do have the ability to explicitly block people and also have some creative ways to use our compliance rules to make sure that you don't have people active syncing directly without having the MDM agent installed.
Okay, and one last question about BlackBerry support.
Sure. So we do integrate with the BlackBerry Enterprise Server as long as you're on 5.0 or higher, and we leverage the APIs to do that. I can actually show you a BlackBerry device within the system here, but you can gather inventory information about that device, be able to send a message to it using either the PIN or the email address. You can do password resets, remote wipes, or bulk removes from your BlackBerry environment as well. And I can show you, we don't have too many BlackBerry devices synchronized right now, but just looking at the BlackBerry Enterprise Server section of the Cloud Extender device view, here you can gather the information in terms of how active users, devices synchronized, and devices reported in prior to the last 30 days. All right, well, now that we covered off the Cloud Extender, I did want to just jump into our Manage 360 overall demo, and I will focus some specific things on the ActiveSync.
Hey, there was a quick question on the watch list that's up here. So someone asked, why is Angry Birds on the list?
We strongly disagree with Angry Birds installation. No, I'm kidding. So the watch list is customizable, and the reason Angry Birds is on here is to show you that you can track various pieces of software within the environment. So when you sign up for Manage 360, we do give you the default watch list that will be very focused around security compliance items. You can also add, remove, or edit those items. So here somebody in our demo environment, one of our sales guys likely, has set up a Angry Birds watch list. But you can also see things about devices not reported in the last X amount of days, devices that don't have any type of encryption or weak encryption, devices that may be on a certain carrier, devices that don't have a passcode protection enabled. The one useful one I wanted to touch on is the one I'm hovered over now, which is 3 of my newly registered devices are pending approval. This is the watch list item that's used for devices that come in a quarantine mode. So we do have the ability to dive into an individual device. So we'll look at this iPad, for example. And if we go and look at his Exchange environment tab, we're going to see that he's currently in a quarantine state. At this point, if I wanted to approve his device, I could go to my ActiveSync actions and I could approve it, and that would allow mail to start flowing down to this device. If not, I could block it, and that would prevent the device from getting mail. You can, of course, go back in and approve it later if the user does meet the particular criteria that they're supposed to.
So for those of you who are Exchange administrators, I think you know that how much more difficult that is to do through the Exchange admin interface than what Val just showed you.
Right, and just focusing in, we'll pretend for a moment that this is just an ActiveSync record. What you're seeing is the information we can pull out of the Exchange server, and some of the items you'll notice that are missing right off the top are, IMEI or phone number, which we're not able to pull from the Exchange environment. And that's where enabling the over-the-air enrollment for your iOS devices and leveraging an MDM solution allow you to pull more information. You're not able to see any inventory about this device in terms of what apps are installed or what the hardware looks like. You're essentially able to see if that mailbox is active, if they have an ActiveSync agent, when it was synchronized, and when it was activated on, as well as the ActiveSync identity. Here you can also see the mailbox approval state and the Exchange policy that's assigned. So when you layer on top our solution in terms of our MDM enrollment, you'll also start to see all the additional detail you can gather here. So now, just by looking at some of the information that the Apple APIs allow us to pull across, I can dive into hardware information here to give more information about that device, internal storage, how much data my applications are taking up, API levels, and you can also set device-specific information, which is somewhat nice from a reporting perspective. Just to take a look at some of the other items here, from a security and compliance perspective, you can look and see what profiles have been distributed down to the devices. You can tell if the device has been jailbroken, if the password status is compliant, or if that device has ever been wiped. You can also see which restrictions have been applied. So here we're blocking explicit music and podcasts and allowing everything else. You can get a comprehensive idea of software that's installed on the device. And this also allows me to create a policy to restrict certain applications from being allowed to be used on the device or to require applications to be on the device. Some additional Manage 360 functionality that it lays on top of Exchange ActiveSync is the ability to distribute applications. You can do document distribution. We do have some mobile expense management tracking, so if you wanted to be able to track your in-network and out-of-network roaming, you can do that within this product. You also see the change in actions. Down below, you're seeing the ActiveSync actions, and we do allow you to do an on-demand refresh of a device from MAS360, the approve and block that we spoke about, changing of the ActiveSync policy, as well as removing the device from the Exchange server. If this was an ActiveSync only device, you'd also see wipe down in the bottom, but since it's a merged record, you're seeing that as an MDM action up above.
Val, there was a question about whether we could locate a device, and I think you can see there the locate feature there, second from the top.
Yeah, we certainly can do a locate. I'll be brave and click on it. And here we go. So Josh looks like he was in Norristown last with his iPad. So it does give you those coordinates. And that works on the Android devices as well. Some of the other functionality that you get here is the ability to send a message down to the device, locking the device. If somebody couldn't find their phone and thought they may have just left it at their house, they may want you to lock it instead of wipe it overall. You can reset the device's password if the user forgets the password. You can issue a selective wipe. And what that does is allow us to dynamically remove certain profiles from the device so it becomes a compliance situation. So an example that I gave earlier is if your device wasn't enrolled, you may not want to allow mail on that device. So if we find you're not enrolled, we can issue an explicit block or a selective wipe to the device, which would remove your mail profiles altogether. You can change the iOS policy, and we'll show you some of the policy options you'll get over Exchange for iOS here in just a few minutes. And then you're also able to remove control from that device, and that allows the user to walk away without any of your corporate data on the device, but still with their pictures and family vacations. So that being said, I did just want to do a quick view of a BlackBerry for the person that asked as well. And we'll just cover that off briefly here.
While we're waiting, there was a question about can I get into the details of how we detect jailbroken or rooted devices? The quick answer is no. We won't get into the details of it, but rest assured we do it.
And just to add on to that answer, we do try to detect it in multiple different ways, so we don't just look for a particular thing, so we can be able to see that. Unfortunately, Apple removed a lot of that from their API, so we had to build around it with our agent. Now, just looking at the BlackBerry here, you'll see, again, similar information that you saw with the iOS device. We do try to be very consistent across the device space. But here I'm able to pull back, my overall hardware inventory information, set custom fields, look at the software that's installed, check the service books and modules that are on the device, and then there's also the action history that will track everything that you can do. In terms of the actions, here's what you're able to do, as I was mentioning earlier, the on-demand refresh, message, reset passwords, change BlackBerry policies, or wipe the device.
There was a question about, a couple of questions about what software needs to be installed on the mobile devices, the endpoints themselves. And I guess the best way to explain it is this. If you're going to manage at an ActiveSync level, then typically the ActiveSync agent is already on the devices. So I think just about every mobile device out there ships with an ActiveSync agent of one type or another. So there is no need to deploy additional software out to the endpoint. In the iOS world, if you want to do basic mobile device management types of things, then MAS360 talks directly to the iOS MDM APIs over Apple's APNS network. For more advanced features like pushing apps or pushing documents, we do have a MAS360 app in the iTunes App Store that needs to be downloaded onto the app. It's a pretty seamless process. On the Android side of the world, since they don't have kind of as well-architected API kind of infrastructure, there is an Android agent in the Google market for MAS360 that is installed during the enrollment process. Again, it's pretty simple. Typically, end user gets through it with 2 or 3 clicks.
Right. I'm going to jump into some policy information here now so you can see some of the layers that we can add on top of ActiveSync. So this is an ActiveSync policy that we pulled across from our Exchange server during the install. And you'll see here you can require passcodes with certain levels, and as we mentioned earlier, not all devices support all of these different options. you have some sync configurations in terms of when you can deal with formatted emails or email size limits. Some high-level device restrictions. The allow camera option, for example, does not apply to Androids, but you can use it for iOS and other devices. And then just some additional information that is more geared towards your Windows mobile devices. You also have some high-level app restrictions that will apply as well. So, enough to get you going in terms of ActiveSync, applying a PIN, making sure you can wipe the device. But on our iOS implementation, we have additional details that you can load through our policies using the Apple APIs. And just to give you an idea, I'll edit this one. In terms of the device passcode, you can see Apple has fairly similar settings as ActiveSync, and the password policies do play together. So even though you have a device enrolled and set up against your ActiveSync server, you will have a combination of both the ActiveSync and iOS or Android policies. And the most restrictive item would win in terms of which value was more secure to make sure that the proper settings were used. With device restrictions, Apple allows you to do additional items in terms of preventing installation of apps, preventing the use of the cameras. We recently added the ability to block Siri when iOS 5 came alive. And we also have the iCloud settings where you can restrict. But you can see here just kind of general use of applications or icons that are on the device, and then your ratings per region. Another thing that we built was our application compliance. So here you can configure restricted apps, allowed apps, or required apps to be on the device. Both Apple and Android allow you to set your wireless settings and push those down securely. So if you were using any type of wireless signal inside of your network, you can push out your SSIDs and particular information without sharing that with the user. With VPN for Apple, we do configure Cisco IPsec or any of the on-demand SSL type clients, so your Cisco AnyConnects, your Junipers, your F5s. And we do support certificate distribution down to the devices for facilitation with those apps as well. One of the other important items is we can configure your Exchange ActiveSync. So when you go through the enrollment process, when the enrollment over the air is completed, the user would be prompted for their Exchange password. At that point, they would be able to enter that information based on what is configured in the policy here and create that ActiveSync connection. If auto quarantine is enabled, they'll still go through that process just to give you some additional visibility. Apple does also allow you to set your roaming settings, so if you wanted to disable data roaming or disable voice roaming, you could do that here. And then we also support web clips, which is the ability to push a bookmark of a website down to the device. Now, we also support IMAP and POP if we have any kind of Val or Gmail users out there. And there's also built-in functionality for managing your CalDAV and your CardDAV and your other calendar subscriptions. So I'm going to bail out of the iOS policy for a moment, and I wanted to go through some of the Android options, but you're going to see it's quite similar. If you look at the device passcode settings, you see items where you can set your numeric, your alphanumeric, your alphabetic information. You can also set particular details. As Android continues to evolve in the market, they're continuing to add additional security functionality. So we do note where applicable what settings are applied to each device. For devices that support encryption, you can force that through MAS 360. You can also block the camera, USB, or various device features, as well as force some of your location policies. Application compliance works the same as it does with iOS, where you can suggest restricted, allowed, or required apps. We recently added the native app compliance policies from Google, which allow you to shut off Gmail or email or other native apps on that device.
So what a lot of our customers do that use our app management is they will disable access to the Android market or the iTunes App Store and enable just the corporate app store, and they'll incorporate apps from those two app stores in their catalog and just kind of give their users kind of a much more kind of curated directory of apps that they can pick from. Another question came in, Val, while you were talking about the iOS 5 settings you showed a minute ago. So the question was kind of how soon after iOS 5 was available, or from Apple, were we able to support those iOS 5 settings in MAS 360?
Sure. So we were pretty much 0 day in terms of our support. We had elevated the policies beforehand, and once iOS 5 was available, we were full functionality.
Yeah, I mean, we were actually kind of, the big debate for us was Apple going to change anything, just prior to the launch. Everything went just fine, and we were literally ready as soon as Apple started pushing things out, or pushing iOS 5 out. All of those features and functions were visible, and our customers could enable them or disable them as they saw fit. This is kind of related to a number of questions that have come in during the webinar about tell me why MAS 360 is better, blah, 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 blah. Obviously I don't want to get into kind of, specifics with competing products, but one of the big differences with MAS is we're 100% cloud-based and a multi-tenant platform, which means that all of our customers leverage the exact same instance of the platform. And even this demo zone that Val's demoing out of is just another account in our platform, no different than any other account, including those of our customers. And so one of the big benefits of that type of infrastructure is we can make an update to the platform, and every single one of our customers inherits it instantly. And so, that we think is a huge advantage, and is kind of one of the reasons why, you might want to really look hard at a cloud-based solution over a traditional client-server or on-prem type model, where those software upgrades that you're going to have to get from the vendor as Android updates or Apple updates iOS are going to mean, work for your IT department to, take a new rev of an app, go test it, and then come up with a plan for how you're going to roll it out in production. So we think it's a huge advantage. None of our customers had to lift a finger to get iOS 5 support. We did all the work for them.
Right. All right, well, I'm going to skip over wireless and VPN for Android, as you do have that capability. In terms of Exchange ActiveSync, Google makes it a little tricky in terms of some of their fragmentation on their Androids out there to be able to configure Exchange. So we do have two options. The first is to try to configure the native email client that's on the device, and we can do that for a series of devices. Some that we can't are Motorola, for example. If you do have the intent of distributing ActiveSync settings down to the device, you may want to entertain using Touchdown. We don't sell Touchdown, we just integrate with it because it is one of the more popular email containers out there. But here we can push Touchdown down during the enrollment process, assign the license key, set up your information, and then we do integrate with the additional Touchdown security settings.
So that question did come in while you were speaking about over-the-air config for email clients on Android. I think the native email client that comes with Android, people quickly find that it's not quite what they would like because it's not an integrated experience like they might be used to on a BlackBerry or even an iPhone, and they quickly kind of want something more like Touchdown.
Correct. All right. Well, I wanted to be able to cover off two other things here and leave a couple minutes for questions at the end. In terms of device groups, we do have some pre-populated groups in the system, and you can certainly use our smart search criteria to create your own groups. But here, here I created a device group for all of my devices. One of the ones that we have out of the box is the ability to detect auto-quarantine devices. So here are your quarantine devices pending approval. We also have some specific Exchange reports here that would easily tell you which Exchange devices are approved and which have been registered against the Exchange server. I know there was a question earlier in terms of being able to push policy at a group level, and you can certainly do that. We do have various actions that you can take on a group. One is to send a message to everybody in that group. You can change iOS or Android policies via the group. You can change the mobile expense management plans or our compliance rule sets. Again, when you do assign a Exchange policy to a device, it will get assigned to all of the devices that that user may have, since Exchange implements that at a mailbox level. One of the last items I wanted to show was just some of our mobile device reporting. So we do have our consolidated mobility intelligence reporting in MAS 360 that gives you a consolidated view of all of your agent managed or ActiveSync managed or BlackBerry managed devices. And to make these numbers look a little bit nicer, I'm just going to go back the last 180 days. And what you'll see here, the graphs will dynamically update. And we'll be able to show devices by ownership, a distribution of your platforms, devices by approval state. So here I can see the approved ActiveSync versus quarantine versus blocked. Some devices, of course, will have no approval state if they're not synchronized to your ActiveSync environment. You can get an idea of devices that are enrolling month over month, your ActiveSync policy distribution, devices that support remote wipe, and then some details about the carriers that folks might be using out there. Of course, clicking on any one of these graphs will bring you into the more detail, and all of this data can be filtered, massaged, and exported into CSVs or Excels, depending on what you may want to look at. So here you can see these 3 devices, and you can narrow in on their approval status, their installed dates, and also be able to export, as I mentioned. The filter options are somewhat nice since you are able to create certain filters, and what you can do is save those current filters for yourself. So when you log into MAS 360, you just have to access that filter as opposed to recreating it every time. From a more advanced perspective, we do have the consolidated hardware and software reports for iOS, for Android, and for BlackBerry. So here you can see the number of people that have some of these applications installed, and then you can drill into the particular software details to gather more insight into that detail. Just to show you quickly one of the hardware overviews, I'll select Android here. And this will just give you better information about your Android distribution, the operating systems that are out there, the manufacturers, free space, and carrier information. So with that, I'm going to hop back to our last slide here. Just bear with me while I switch back over to PowerPoint.
And I'm going to talk a little bit. So there was a question that came in about support for Kindle Fire. I think we support it, right?
Yeah, so I should have left my my Internet Explorer window up there. We recently did build an agent for the Kindle. We're currently waiting on Amazon's approval, but we do have approval of the overall application. It does install. We've been able to, use various actions, and we have some data sheets that we could pass on to you for additional information on that.
Yeah, so there's certainly plenty of them roaming around the halls here in our office. We may have confused you a little bit, some folks who kind of saw the touchdown integration. So you can manage Android devices completely without needing to use touchdown. So you can wipe them through MAS 360, enable encryption if that particular device supports it, all those kinds of things. I think the only point we were making with our touchdown integration is that in the Android world, there are plenty of companies that decide to standardize on touchdown, and Touchdown's built a lot of additional security features into their mail client that go beyond what you would get with the standard Android mail client. And if you want to adopt Touchdown and leverage those features, like preventing attachments from getting downloaded or keeping attachments encrypted or preventing them from being saved to the SD card, you can leverage all of that stuff through MAS. But you can still obviously manage an Android device kind of fully through MAS, regardless of what mail client you've got running on the device. So I just wanted to make sure we clarified that. There was a question about kind of penning or geofencing. What I'll say is stay tuned. We're working hard on some geofencing and network fencing features, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if it's the topic of a soon-to-be-announced more webinar. So stay tuned on that. There are a couple of other questions about kind of service tracking. MAS doesn't do any tracking of the kind of quality of the cellular connections. We track your basic data usage so that you can know where you are against your data caps, but we're certainly not trying to be like Carrier IQ or something like that, where we're tracking kind of the quality of service or the type of service. There was also a question about do we do anything to help identify agents or remote devices that are hitting the OWA component of Exchange ActiveSync. We don't do that, and as a matter of fact, we think that's an advantage. We don't get in the middle of any of that email traffic that's going back and forth between the mobile device and your Exchange servers. So we're kind of off to the side. We don't see that traffic. We don't manage or monitor that traffic in any way. So we view that as an advantage since we can never get in the way of your end users getting their email, and we think that's a good thing. There were a number of questions about how we sell MAS 360. So the answer is it's simply per device per month. So that is the all-in price. We're cloud-based, so there's no setup fees, there's no maintenance fees. The price per device includes 24/7 help desk support, and it is literally that simple to buy. So based on the number of devices you want to manage, there's a kind of a sliding scale that varies. But you literally take the number of devices you want to manage, times it by that per device price. That's the deal. So it's pretty simple, as simple to buy as it is to try. I think John has been furiously sending out the links to evaluate MAS 360. We offer a fully functional 30-day eval of the product. If you need a little more time, like 31 days, we're certainly happy to extend it a little bit. But what you'll have if you sign up for the eval, and when we end the webinar in a minute, I think your browser is going to get redirected to our eval page. If you sign up for the eval, it's fully functional, and you'll have an account just like the demo account that Val just demoed out of. Fully functional. Use it. Call us. We'll help you get the most out of it during your 30 days, and see if it solves your problem. So it's the beauty of the cloud, right? It's easy to try, and obviously what we want you to do is decide for yourself whether MAS 360 can solve your problem, then trust Val or I or someone else about whether a product will meet your needs or not. So we give you the ability to find out for yourself. So we think it's a huge advantage. On January 5th, we're going to be reprising a tried and true webinar. So this is always one of our most popular ones, which is how to enable iPhones and iPads in the enterprise. So Donna Lima will be back doing that one, and I think the one after that will be another reprise of enabling Android devices in the enterprise. So those are two of our more popular ones. All of our past webinars you can see here. The links are kind of right there on the Master Center. So please go to the Master Center if you'd like to see past webinars or just learn more about MAS 360 itself or mobility in general. So there's just tons of articles up there. I don't see any more new questions kind of drifting in. So I'm going to drop now. You can see Val's email up there. I think most of you probably have my email since I was the one who sent the invite out. If you've got any further questions, please feel free to contact us. Otherwise, have a great holiday, and thanks for joining today. Val, thanks for presenting.
No problem. Thanks, Joe. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.